Have you ever noticed how the strongest journeys are often walked in silence? A woman who walks without companions is not weak. She is not abandoned. She is not lonely. She is a soul guided by God's light, walking a path few dare to tread. People may wonder, how does she keep going without support, without a hand to hold, without voices to cheer her on? But the truth is, she carries within her the greatest companionship anyone could ever have, the presence of God. And when a woman walks with God, she never truly walks alone. My dear friends, life has a way of testing our courage in the moments we stand without support. We are often told that strength comes from who stands beside us, but sometimes life removes everyone, leaving us with only ourselves and the divine within. And that is where real power begins. A woman who walks without companions does not walk in emptiness. She walks in fullness, she walks in faith, she walks in resilience. Her steps may be silent, but they echo with strength. Her journey may look solitary, but it shines with God's presence. Tonight, I want to share with you the beauty, the power, and the divine truth behind this silent strength through 7 reflections on what it means for a woman to walk without companions, yet never without purpose. When a woman walks without companions, the world may think she is walking in emptiness. People may assume she is lacking, that her life is incomplete without a circle around her, that her silence is an indication of loneliness. But the truth is far more beautiful and profound. Her solitude is not a hollow space, it is a sacred sanctuary, carefully crafted by God. It is in this sanctuary that she finds herself, where she listens not to the noise of the world, but to the whispers of the divine within her. When distractions fall away and there is no crowd to please, no constant chatter to drown out her heart, she becomes deeply connected to the source of her strength, God Himself. Think about it. How often do we see people running from one conversation to another, desperate for validation, needing others to remind them of their worth? And yet, when those voices fade, they feel lost because they have never taken the time to meet themselves in stillness. But the woman who walks alone embraces this stillness. She does not see it as punishment, but as protection. While others look outside for company, she looks inside for clarity. While others fear silence, she learns to treasure it as a sacred dialogue between her soul and God. Imagine a lotus flower blooming in the stillness of a pond. There are no crowds cheering it on, no companions holding its petals together, and yet it blossoms with grace, untouched by the mud beneath it. That is how a woman in solitude blossoms. She realizes that even without external support, the divine presence nourishes her from within. Her sanctuary is not built with walls of stone, but with walls of prayer, faith, and inner strength. And within those walls, she feels a companionship that no human could ever give her, the eternal companionship of God. Daily life often proves this truth in subtle ways. There are women who sit alone in their rooms after a long, tiring day, with no one to listen to their struggles, no friend to share their burdens with. Yet when they close their eyes and breathe, they feel a calmness rising from within. That calmness is not accidental. It is God reminding them that He is enough. There are women who walk into workplaces, schools, or even their own homes feeling unseen, unsupported, and unheard, but in their hearts, they carry a quiet prayer. That prayer is their sanctuary, keeping them standing tall when no one else offers a shoulder. We often mistake companionship for security, but real security comes when you realize that even if everyone leaves, God does not. When a woman truly understands this, she stops fearing solitude. She sees it as a gift, not a burden. She uses that space to build herself, to discover who she is without the labels and opinions of others. And in doing so, she becomes a woman of unshakable dignity. People may call her lonely, but she knows better. She is not lonely, she is deeply connected. She is not abandoned, she is protected. There is a story of a traveler walking through a desert. He had no companions, no map, and no visible signs of support. To an outsider, he looked helpless. But the traveler carried within him a deep faith that each step he took was guided. And even though his journey looked empty, it was full of unseen strength. In the same way, a woman who walks without companions appears to be alone, but her faith makes her stronger than 100 voices around her. Her solitude becomes her classroom. She learns patience when there is no one to rush her. She learns resilience when there is no one to lean on. She learns self-respect when there is no one to flatter her. And above all, she learns trust. Trust in God's plan, trust in the timing of life, trust in the invisible hand that guides her steps. When people gather around her, they may see her calmness and mistake it for arrogance. They may see her silence and call it weakness. But only she knows the secret, that her silence is filled with conversations with God, that her calmness comes from resting in His presence. This is why she walks without fear. This is why she walks without needing applause. She does not walk to impress. She walks to express the strength of her soul. And here is the most inspiring part: the sanctuary of solitude she builds does not just strengthen her, it radiates outwards. Others who meet her begin to feel that same strength. They may not understand why, but in her presence they feel peace. This is because a woman who carries God's companionship within her becomes a living temple. Her solitude shines as light for others, teaching them that they too do not need to fear being alone. So, when you see a woman walking without companions, do not pity her. Do not think she is lacking. Instead, recognize the quiet power in her steps. Recognize that she is not walking in emptiness, but in fullness. Recognize that her solitude is not a void, but a sacred sanctuary, where she walks hand in hand with God Himself. And that, my friends, is the most powerful companionship of all. She walks without companions, but she does not walk without dignity. One of the greatest lessons solitude teaches is that self-respect can be a far stronger companion than shallow company. In a world where people often surround themselves with others just to avoid being alone, this truth becomes even more powerful. Many people fear the idea of walking alone, not because they are weak, but because they think being alone means being unloved. So they cling to friendships that drain them, relationships that disrespect them, and circles that shrink their soul. But a woman who chooses self-respect over shallow company begins to taste a freedom that many never experience. Picture a woman sitting at a table with people who laugh at her dreams, dismiss her opinions, or mock her values. The world might say, at least she has company. But is that really companionship? Or is it just a crowd? Compare that to a woman who leaves such a table, sits alone with her tea, and smiles to herself knowing she did not compromise her dignity. That moment of silence may seem lonely to others, but it is rich with self-respect. And self-respect is not just a word, it is the foundation of her inner kingdom. Everyday life gives us examples of this choice. Think about the times people stay in relationships just because they are afraid of being alone, even though those relationships are full of disrespect. They tolerate hurtful words, indifference, and neglect, convincing themselves that, least I have someone. But having someone at the cost of your peace is not companionship, it is captivity. On the other hand, A woman who stands firm, who says, I would rather walk alone than walk with someone who does not honor me, becomes unshakable. She is not waiting for the world to validate her. She validates herself by honoring her own worth. Self-respect is not arrogance. It is not about thinking you are better than others. It is about knowing you are worthy of love, dignity, and kindness, and refusing to accept less than that. When a woman learns to carry her own respect like a crown, she no longer bows to shallow company. She no longer feels the need to shrink herself just to fit into someone else's comfort. She becomes selective with her energy. She realizes that every step she takes with respect for herself is a step closer to the presence of God within her. And every step she takes compromising her dignity is a step away from that divine connection. Think of a tree. A tree that grows strong and tall does not bend to every passing wind. It stands firm, deeply rooted, offering shade and fruit, but never losing its core strength. A woman who walks with self-respect is like that tree. She can give kindness, she can offer love, but she never allows herself to be uprooted by shallow company. People may come and go, but she remains grounded, and in her grounding she finds power. There is also a quiet beauty in the courage it takes to choose self-respect. It is not easy to walk away from circles where you feel pressured to stay. It is not easy to say no to people who may accuse you of being proud, difficult, or cold. But in those very moments, when a woman holds her ground, she reclaims her freedom. She understands that respect is not begged for, it is commanded through the way she carries herself. In daily life, we see people pretending to enjoy conversations they don't agree with, laughing at jokes that wound their hearts, or nodding to opinions that go against their values just because they don't want to seem out of place. But what happens inside them? They leave those gatherings feeling drained, empty, and unseen. Now imagine the opposite, a woman who gently but firmly says, "This does not align with me." She may walk away alone, but she walks away lighter, freer, and stronger. That is the power of self-respect. The truth is, shallow company may fill a room, but it cannot fill a heart. It can surround you with noise, but it cannot give you peace. Self-respect, however, can give you the strength to sit in silence and still feel whole. It reminds you that your worth is not determined by how many people sit beside you, but by how deeply you honor the person you see in the mirror. And when you carry that kind of respect for yourself, you no longer chase after people. You attract those who truly see your value. Even more, self-respect aligns you with God's view of you. The divine has created every soul with infinite worth, with dignity that no insult or neglect can erase. When you uphold your self-respect, you are in fact honoring the spark of God within you. You are saying, "I refuse to let the world treat lightly what God has created with greatness." And that realization changes everything. So when she walks without companions, she is not truly walking alone. Her strongest companion is her self-respect, holding her hand, lifting her head, and keeping her step steady. People may wonder, why doesn't she stay where she is tolerated? But she knows better. She does not settle for tolerance when she deserves honor. She does not settle for shallow laughter when she deserves sincere joy. She does not settle for being half seen when she was created to shine fully. And that is the lesson her walk teaches us. It is better to walk in solitude with self-respect than to walk in a crowd that demands you betray yourself. It is better to sit in silence with dignity than to speak in a room where your voice is belittled. It is better to honor your worth alone than to compromise it just to belong. For at the end of the day, Self-respect is not just a companion, it is a shield, a guide, and a reminder that you were never meant to crawl when God designed you to stand tall. Her silence is not emptiness, it is a sacred channel through which she hears what the world so often forgets to listen for: the whispers of God. When a woman walks without companions, she is gifted with something many fear, but few embrace: the stillness that allows the soul to hear the divine voice. In a world that never stops talking, that constantly shouts with opinions, comparisons, and distractions, her silence becomes her greatest teacher. It teaches her that not all wisdom comes from noise, not all answers come from conversations, and not all comfort comes from company. Sometimes the deepest guidance comes in the quiet moments where only her heart and God are in dialogue. Think about how we often miss the most beautiful sounds around us: the rustling of leaves, the rhythm of our own breath, the gentle song of birds. All these are drowned out by the constant noise of life. In the same way, the voice of God is always present, but we drown it out with chatter, with worry, with endless conversations. But the woman who walks without companions learns to embrace silence. And in that silence, she finds that God has been speaking to her all along. His whispers of guidance, encouragement, and love were never absent. They were only waiting for her to quiet the noise so she could listen. Everyday life gives us powerful examples of this. There are moments when people sit in crowded places, surrounded by laughter and music, yet feel completely disconnected. But that same person, sitting alone in a quiet room, suddenly feels a sense of peace wash over them. They can think clearly. They can breathe deeply. They can sense an unseen presence guiding them. That presence is the whisper of God that becomes clearer when the noise of the world fades away. Silence is not a weakness. Silence is a bridge. In her silence, the woman finds answers to questions she once thought had no solution. In her silence, she feels reassured when fear knocks at her heart. In her silence, she begins to understand that every challenge, every delay, every difficulty in her life has a purpose. She no longer panics because she learns to listen more than she reacts. She listens more to her soul than to the crowd. She listens more to God than to gossip. And in that listening, she becomes wiser than those who surround themselves with endless words. Imagine a lake at dawn. The water is still, the world is quiet, and in that calm reflection, you can see the sky perfectly mirrored on its surface. But when waves and disturbances shake the water, the reflection blurs and disappears. The same is true with the human heart. When it is filled with noise, it cannot reflect God's guidance. But when it is still, it mirrors the divine perfectly. A woman who walks without companions lives like that still lake. Her silence allows her heart to reflect God's voice with clarity. Sometimes people misunderstand her silence. They think she is reserved, too quiet, or even weak. But she knows something they don't. Silence is strength. It takes strength to walk away from meaningless conversations. It takes strength to hold back from speaking when words will not bring peace. It takes strength to stay still when the world pushes you to rush. She is not silent because she has nothing to say. She is silent because she is listening to something greater. There are countless women who live this truth daily. A mother who sits silently at night, praying for her children, may not be surrounded by friends or companions, but in her silence, she feels God guiding her heart. A young woman who walks home alone, thinking about her future, may not have anyone to talk to, but in that quiet walk, she begins to feel clarity about the next step she must take. These moments are not accidents. They are sacred invitations from God, reminding us that His voice is not in the thunder but in the whisper. Her silence becomes her anchor. It keeps her grounded when storms try to uproot her. It keeps her calm when life becomes overwhelming. It keeps her connected when people around her disconnect. The world often glorifies noise, but she glorifies stillness because she has discovered the secret that silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of God. Even when she faces challenges, her silence protects her. Instead of reacting with anger when insulted, she remains quiet and listens for God's guidance. Instead of rushing into decisions under pressure, she waits in stillness for clarity. Instead of filling her loneliness with meaningless chatter, she fills it with the quiet awareness of God's companionship. This makes her different. This makes her strong. So when she walks without companions, do not mistake her silence for sadness. Do not mistake her quietness for emptiness. That silence is a conversation deeper than words, richer than music, and more healing than any crowd could offer. In her silence, she does not feel small, she feels vast. She does not feel forgotten, she feels chosen. She does not feel empty, she feels full. The beauty of her silence is that it transforms her. It softens her anger, strengthens her patience, and sharpens her intuition. It teaches her to live guided by God's whispers instead of the world's shouts. And the woman who learns to walk with that kind of silence carries within her a power that no amount of noise can ever match. So let us not fear silence. Let us not rush to fill every empty moment with words or distractions. Let us learn from her example that silence is not loneliness, but intimacy with God. And when a woman embraces that silence, she does not walk alone. She walks with the most powerful voice of all, the gentle, guiding whispers of the divine. When a woman walks without companions, she slowly begins to realize a profound truth. Her greatest source of strength is not in the approval of others, but in the strength that already exists within her. From childhood, many of us are conditioned to look outside for validation. We want our parents to clap for us, our friends to agree with us, our community to approve of us. And while approval can feel sweet, it is also fleeting. One moment people praise you, the next they criticize you. If your strength is tied to their changing opinions, then you will rise and fall as quickly as their moods. But the woman who learns to depend on her inner strength instead of outer approval becomes unshakable. She walks steadily even when applause is absent, and she shines brightly even when no one notices. Daily life provides us with countless examples of this truth. Imagine a young woman who dreams of pursuing a career that inspires her. At first, she receives encouragement, but as challenges arise, people around her begin to question her. They tell her it's impractical, they doubt her ability, they push her to choose a safer path. If her confidence is built only on their approval, she will collapse under their doubts. But if her strength comes from within, she will smile, listen respectfully, and keep walking toward her dream. She knows that the fire inside her is greater than the shadows cast by others. Depending on inner strength is not arrogance. It does not mean you ignore advice or close yourself off. It means that you know your worth, even when others fail to recognize it. It means that your heart is anchored in God's presence. And that presence gives you courage that no human validation can provide. Approval is temporary, but inner strength is eternal because it comes from the divine source within you. Think of a mountain. A mountain does not need people to applaud its height in order to stand tall. It does not shrink because someone calls it small, nor does it grow because someone calls it great. It simply stands firm, rooted in its own existence. A woman who depends on her inner strength is like that mountain. She does not collapse when others ignore her, nor does she become inflated when others praise her. She knows who she is with or without acknowledgement. Many times in life, people will not understand your journey. They may not approve of your choices, your silence, or your courage. And that's where most people stumble. They change themselves to please others. They dim their light so that no one feels uncomfortable. They suppress their dreams to fit the expectations of the crowd. But what happens then? They live a life of quiet regret, always wondering what would have happened if they had trusted themselves more. The woman who depends on her inner strength refuses to live this way. She may walk without companions, but she does not walk without courage. There is an everyday beauty in such resilience. Consider the woman who stands firm in her values at work, even if it makes her less popular. Consider the woman who chooses peace over gossip, even if it means fewer friends. Consider the woman who follows her heart, even if it leads her away from familiar circles. On the surface, these choices may look isolating, but beneath them is a deep well of inner strength, a strength that does not waver with the tides of opinion. This kind of strength also brings peace. When you stop living for approval, you stop living in fear of rejection. When you stop waiting for applause, you stop being hurt by silence. And when you stop depending on others to define your worth, you discover a freedom that no one can take away. This is why such a woman walks with grace. She does not hurry to prove herself. She does not tremble when people doubt her. She does not collapse when companions leave. She has built her life on a foundation that cannot be shaken. The foundation of inner strength and divine trust. One of the most powerful truths is that inner strength grows the most when outer approval disappears. When no one is clapping, you learn to clap for yourself. When no one encourages you, you learn to encourage yourself. When no one believes in you, you learn to believe in yourself with God's presence as your guide. These moments are not punishments, they are training grounds. They mold you into someone who can stand strong even in the fiercest storms. People may call her stubborn, but she is simply steadfast. They may say she is different, but she is simply authentic. They may think she is cold, but in reality, she is deeply warm. Warm enough to sustain herself without constantly needing others to feed her with approval. She knows her strength does not come from being noticed, it comes from being true to who she is. So when she walks without companions, she is not weak and she is not lost. She walks with her inner strength as her shield, her courage as her staff, and her faith as her compass. Approval will fade, opinions will shift, and people will come and go, but her strength remains because it is rooted not in them, but in her connection with God. And this is the message her life speaks. If you depend on outer approval, your strength will always be fragile. But if you depend on the strength within, no rejection, no silence, no absence of company can break you. For the one who carries inner strength never truly walks alone. She walks with the eternal force of God flowing through her, and that is more powerful than the loudest applause the world could ever give.